Can you believe all of those broke Android guys trying to text us? I know, right? Who wants to do RCS anyway? iMessage is the future. Exactly. Just have more money and be able to afford a quality user experience with Apple making an iPhone. There's no way you can beat this. You're absolutely right, my good-looking friend. What did you pay for yours? Oh, I got this on Marketplace for about $200. Oh, really? I got mine through eBay for about $100. Nice. That's an incredible deal. But, why don't people just have more money? I know, right? Yeah, it's probably a random combo that you weren't anticipating. Why am I comparing iPhone 10 versus iPhone SE 2? Well, I can tell you it's definitely not, because this is my current phone and this has been my wife's phone for the past 3 years, and that just happened to be convenient for the sake of this comparison video. No! I was actually doing a hunt, particularly for you guys, on what the best, most budget-friendly, but still usable iPhone out there is. You know, there might be some more heavy-duty Apple sheep that don't want to look at the secondhand market, don't want to look at certified refurbished, and will just tell you to look at Apple's website. Okay. You want a cheap iPhone? Yeah, SE3. That one's cheap. I guess buy the cheap one. That would be a much shorter video. But when it comes to the secondhand market for what you can get used iPhones for, which I've been very much enjoying my iPhone 10, I wanted to see where the best value was overall. And honestly, I think the SE2 is basically unbeatable. And even though I've been happy with my iPhone 10, I thought this would be a good opportunity to show you guys what you can get for actually less money than what it would cost for you to buy a used iPhone 10 like I did. So on the surface, there's clearly a lot of differences between these two iPhones, so I thought, for the sake of being fair, we should start with what these phones actually have in common, and then get more to the obvious differences. But for one, they both still charge via Lightning, which I guess most iPhones were considering do. They both cap out at 20 watts of peak charging speed. They both have basically the same video playback battery life, although the iPhone 10 does physically have a little bit better battery life when it comes to audio playback than the SE2, but Apple states both make it 13 hours on video playback. They both are water resistant for up to 1 meter for 30 minutes. They both support wireless charging, which is a must in my book. That means, you know, it's Tesla proof. You can drop it in the car and it'll wirelessly charge. They both have 12 megapixel rear facing cameras, and they both have front and rear portrait mode capability, although they accomplish portrait mode in completely different ways, which is why it's kind of fascinating. But yeah, both of the front selfie cameras are 7 megapixels, and they also, even though one is OLED and one is LCD, they both have the same peak brightness of 625 nits. And of course, they both have the rounded chassis, which fits better in the hand. And most importantly, to so many of you, they both run the latest version of iOS, which means, of course, they still support Apple Pay. You can still use the Apple Card on both of these things, and you still get software support, all of these 16.4 updates, and probably get iOS 17 on both of these things as well, but I think that's about where the similarities end. The biggest, most noticeable difference when first looking at these two phones is, yes, the iPhone 10 has the far higher contrast ratio thanks to that Super Retina display. It's OLED, it's a taller aspect ratio, there's no home button, it's only Face ID, and that may be a downside for some of you having an LCD that's not as rich, that's not as vibrant, but remember, still the same peak brightness levels, less likely to have burn-in issues, although this iPhone 10 has been in use since launch day. There's still no burn-in, but LCD is just old faithful. It works, and Apple, honestly, still has very decent LCDs. And for some of you, maybe you prefer Touch ID in the home button. It's a bit more reliable. It's a bit more consistent. For those of you that may be still on an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 7, or maybe even some of you are still on the first generation SE. Even in 2023, I still think this is an incredible bargain because of what it's rocking under the hood. Not so much the outside, although I do have to admit, like, this is the cleanest, most minimal, most simplified smartphone back design that I have ever seen. Frankly, I think the back of the SE2 looks better than the back of the iPhone 10. Apple logo's not centered, the camera bump is much bigger, all this extra lettering on the back, look at it, it's hideous. Whereas this centered logo, no text of any kind, no engraving, no writing, just one tiny circular camera bump up in the corner, one tiny microphone dot and the flash, and that is it. I have still yet to see any other smartphone out out there to rival the simplicity and the cleanness of this design. In fact, because it's white, it doesn't even pick up really fingerprints. Same with that silver aluminum, and thank God Apple switched to black bezels with the SE2. This is just such a beautiful phone if you don't care that much about the forehead and chin. But of course, the back of the phone isn't really something you're gonna be looking at, right? Most of you are probably gonna have a case on this thing anyway, so I'm just kind of drooling over nothing right now. But where I think the iPhone SE2 really comes in clutch over the iPhone 10 is that A13 chip versus the A11 chip. So I'm not one to bring up Geekbench scores all that much because I don't really think it translates to anything. But what the A13 chip enables is a lot more software capability that Apple, whether it's truthful or not, has restricted the A11 chip out of. So thanks to the A13 chip, this has 4 times as many neural cores as the iPhone 10 and an extra GPU core, because I'm sure all of you iPhone SE users out there love to do some intense mobile gaming. But the more important things that I really appreciate that the SE2 gets that the iPhone 10 does not is things like live text. This is really cool if you're taking a picture of a phone number and you just want to call it, or you take a picture of a shipping label and you want to track it. You're basically just at any time able to screenshot part of your screen, highlight the text, and be able to copy that text and paste it in another app. Simultaneously, it accesses the coolest feature in iOS 16 that unfortunately my iPhone 10 does not have, which is subject lift. I can literally just push on any subject from any picture, whether or not it was taken on this phone or another, or just download it from the web, and I can lift that subject out, move it into other apps as a PNG file, and it works. It's honestly kind of spooky how well it's able to mask out these random objects. And another one of my favorite features, continuity camera, which allows you to turn your iPhone camera into a webcam for your Mac. SE2 can do it, and the iPhone 10 cannot. And that's not even to mention that obviously the A13 chip is probably going to get several more years of software support than the iPhone 10, which, depending on what you prioritize in your phone purchase, that might be a very, very crucial feature. And even though there's no true depth camera system and there's no telephoto lens on the back, portrait mode honestly still works really, really well. I mean, there's a different approach to HDR processing. So the iPhone 10, when I took a portrait mode on the front-facing camera, seems to be a bit warmer. And the SE2 feels like it's leaning towards that smartphone trend these days, which is just brighter means better. So there's just lighter tones overall. But thanks to just the neural engine on the A13 chip, it doesn't need any fancy hardware in order to achieve portrait mode. And in my opinion, the portrait mode shots from the main sensor, the 12 megapixel one, look better than the portrait mode shots on the iPhone 10 rear camera, because if you want to take a portrait mode shot with the rear facing camera on the 10, it has to be from the telephoto, which in a lot of environments is not very good with low light. It clearly shows lots of really soft edges. It's not as good at masking things out, and there's a lot more noise and a lot more grain. So even though this is probably going to be better at zooming in with that telephoto lens in well-lit environments, I'm still willing to admit I think the SE2 has the better overall camera system. It's got the better HDR. Both of these can still record 4K at 60, and they both still ship with 64 gigs by default, but iPhone 10 goes up to 256 gigs if that's important to you. This maxes out at 128, but I would argue that the cheaper phone has the better camera system, and because it will probably get 2 or 3 more years of software support than the iPhone 10 will, and if you're willing to go secondhand on eBay refurbished through top-rated plus buyers, you can actually find these for like just over $100 from like certified sellers, not, you know, scammers on eBay, that will still give you a full 1-year warranty and a 30-day return window, which I have tried myself. I can attest that it works. It's reliable. They give you a full refund back if you're upset with the phone you get or whatever, or it's not up to the conditions that they claimed. And if you're really committed and you're on a super budget and you want to start leaving the eBay refurbished options, you can actually find these for $50, which is honestly quite breathtaking to think about. Like, you could buy several iPhone SE2s for less money than AirPods 3. Like, just the sheer volume of SE2s out there that are still running iOS 16 and will probably continue to for several more years. They're still getting the bulk of the new iOS 16 features. You still got your lock screen customization. You still got subject lift and live text and continuity camera. And they're in decent condition out there for like under $150. Yeah, like, I don't know how else there could be a better deal out there. I mean, I guess there's maybe some iPhone 8s you can get for cheaper, but they're going to be missing out on so many of the latest software updates, and we really don't even know for sure if the A11 chip is going to get iOS 17. I'm hoping it does, but very unlikely to get iOS 18, whereas this, I think, is pretty likely to get iOS 18. And the fact that there's such a capable smartphone out there with a great chip, great camera, and sure, not the best battery life, but I would say the best solution is to just keep some chargers around at your workplace or in the car or at home so that you can get by with a slightly weaker battery life. But if we're just going for overall cheapest iPhone that's going to get the most amount of support, I feel like right now, in the beginning of 2023, this is basically unbeatable, and it absolutely makes me heavily discourage anyone from getting the iPhone SE3, considering how insanely similar it is to this phone. If you're not bothered by having the home button and Touch ID and having a LCD display, then I don't think you're going to be bothered by not having 5G or not having the A15 chip. This still gets Apple Music Sing, guys, because you need that 8-core neural engine to be able to sing along with Apple Music. This can do it. My iPhone 10 cannot. So essentially, other than the display, this is a pretty freaking hard deal to beat in the consumer tech space, especially if you're just, you know, an Apple guy that wants to stay in the Apple ecosystem and work with iOS. In the Android world, sure, it's going to be a completely different story, but I mean, look behind me, like, we don't do that here. So let me know what you think is a better deal in the consumer tech space when it comes to an iPhone that's 3 years old and still getting lots of software support and will probably continue to for the next 3 or 4 years. I guess some of us are wondering, should I buy the new budget phone or should I buy the old flagship? Well, it turns out the solution, buy the old budget phone. And then, as long as you got the software support, which Apple provides, you'll get the best deal possible. Thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you all in the next one.